So I'm going to talk to you about how we set up the GH4 for our Sunday services. So we'll start with turning on the camera, which can be done with the off-on switch here. Once that boots up, the first thing we're going to check is our white balance. So you have various controls right here: white balance, ISO, which on this particular camera, the color is worn away a little bit. And first we're going to check out the white balance. I'm going to click on the white balance button. It brings me to this screen. The first thing we'll do is we want to double check that we're on these particular cameras, that they're all set to 2600K. K stands for Kelvin. And if it wasn't on 2600K, you would hit this up button here. And then you can toggle it. And actually, let me take off the lens cap so you can see kind of how it changes it. So if I toggle it up, you see things get warmer. If I toggle it down, things get cooler. Right now, we're running our services at 2600K because of our stage lights. And so I can hit set there. And then we have a custom adjustment to color adjustment to that color temperature. So if you hit the bottom down arrow here, we actually run this at all the way down to the bottom, which I'm using this down arrow, and then one to the right. So that says B1M9. That's the custom color setting that we have on these cameras so that they more so match our big JVC studio camera that is camera 1. So I'm gonna hit set. So you can see that our color setting has been set and we have the right color temperature there. So I'm going to click the white balance button again to exit out. And I'm gonna select it one more time just to double check that it saved, and you can see that it did. Okay, so the next thing we're going to check is our shutter speed. So the shutter speed is located right here, and we want it always to say 60. I will give you an example. If it falls below 60, you see my hand gets really jittery. That's what your video will look like. If you go way above 60, not only does it start to get darker, but the hand becomes really smooth, almost too smooth. So we always keep it at 60 frames per second, and you don't really want to change that. That's where you want it to be. Now this dial right here, as a reminder, controls your aperture setting, which controls how much light is let into the camera. You see as I go to the larger aperture setting, which is 22 on this particular lens. This is a 14 to 140 zoom lens. The smaller the aperture setting, which is at this particular camera, is a 3.5. We get a much brighter image, and we also get more of a depth of field. So if I were to let's see, zoom in on this table right here, you can kind of tell. It's kind of hard to tell, but my background is very blurry. It's not the best example, but we want that blurry background. So that's why we try to run our aperture as low as possible. And it will vary by the lens. And it will also vary by how far you're zoomed in. So if I zoom in all the way, you can see the smallest aperture setting I can go is 5.6. But as I zoom all the way back out, I can actually drop back down to a 3.5, okay? The last thing you're going to check to make sure, so you'll want to make sure that, the aperture settings are as low as possible before setting your ISO. So the ISO is this middle button right here. It has two little bumps on it. That helps me if I'm filming Sunday morning service and I'm quickly trying to change this because I've switched who I'm focusing my shot on. If you just feel for these two bumps, you know that you're on the right setting. So the ISO controls artificially brightening the image. For our circumstances, if we can get away with it, we don't want to go above 800, and if possible, we want to stay at 200. Typically, for these cameras, 200 isn't possible. You're at least going to have to be at 320, 400, sometimes even 800. But you can see that's controlled with this dial right here. Now, there's a ton of different dials on here, but typically what it will do, it will give you a little symbol in the bottom right corner to show you which dial actually controls that setting. So don't go over 800. When you start going over 800, the image starts to degrade and gets pretty grainy. Okay, so that's aperture. I'm just gonna leave it at 400 right now, and I'm gonna hit it again. The other thing you will be able to tell is that if you hit this display button here, it will cycle through various forms of display. The one we want is the version that has your little leveling meter on it. So if you just keep punching that, you will eventually get the display that has a leveling meter on it. And we obviously want that meter on all of the GH4s to be level. And when it turns green, it's level. Okay, so I believe that's all that I would like to cover on the GH4. If you have any questions about the GH4, please email me, and we can go over the camera in further details. All right, thanks.